Okay, you're good to go, Bob.
All right, thank you, Wendy. Yeah, greetings, everyone who is signed in for this evening. You're very lucky to have such a wonderful PTSA to put these presentations together for you. And I know in the coming weeks and months, you're going to bring some really great professionals your way to help you with the college search and application process. So I'm actually very honored to be here again tonight just to talk a bit about the college essay. And tips moving forward for students. And it's everybody thinks it's a big mystery. What are colleges looking for? What are colleges looking for? And the very simple answer is they just want to get to know you as an individual. So that's why they ask so many questions. So we'll jump to the first slide. And with the first three slides, I actually want to talk, it's more about the applications themselves. For those of you who are not familiar, the Common Application, they have over 900 member institutions from across the country and around the world. And so in any case, as I said, there are about 900 institutions. And the Common Application, when you start it, you'll see 7 essay prompts, but students only need to answer one of those prompts. There is a word limit of 650 words. But the important thing to note is it is a word limit of 650. It is not your goal. And actually, I like what the University of Washington says when they talk about the college essay. They say a good, clear, concise essay can and should be written in about 300 to 400 words. So don't feel that you need to write any more. If you feel that you've got a great essay at 400 or 450 words, stop. You don't have to add anything to it. So that is the Common Application, and these are the 2021 prompts in front of you. So if we can jump to the next slide, we will see the Coalition Application. The Coalition Application is similar to the Common Application, except there are only 140 member institutions. Without getting into too much detail, these are all schools that essentially indicate that they can award students of need full aid packages as necessary, or at least the in-state public schools. And the important thing to note with the coalition is that the University of Washington is on the coalition, and it is the only way that you can submit an application to the University of Washington through the coalition. Similar to the Common Application, they do offer several prompts instead of 7. The coalition says you have up to 5 prompts, and again, you only need to answer 1. But you'll note the very first one I highlighted, the University of Washington specifically states this is the question that you must answer for them. And as you see on the bottom left, the coalition says aim for about 500 to 550 words. When I work with students, I generally tell them, whatever the prompt indicates, 550, 650, try to keep it at 500 words or less, and you should be solid for pretty much any school across the country to answer those questions. And similar to the Common Application, the coalition, number 5, says submit an essay topic of your choice. Because the Common has that, if you answer this question for the University of Washington, it would suffice for the Common Application as well. So, okay, so to the next screen. This is important. If you joined in last night, you probably saw this screen as well. The Common Application and the Coalition Application each have a very similar question, and it is in regard to COVID-19. Instead of every college across the country giving their own question or whatnot to students, basically saying, how has COVID-19 affected you, or have you been affected in any particular way, they allow students to do this in an optional section for the Common and the Coalition. And the college reps last night, really across the country, say, if you have experienced something during COVID-19 that truly sets you apart from all the other students who are affected, yes, every student across the country was affected by COVID-19 in some way. They've missed their friends. Maybe they find it a little bit difficult or challenging to learn via the computer. Well, a lot of students have been affected that way. However, there are students who sadly, maybe they lost a young loved one due to COVID-19. Maybe you had a hard time with internet connection. Maybe you just kept getting bounced out and learning was exceptionally difficult because you weren't in person because of that. That's when you might want to answer this optional question. But if your answer to this optional question might sound like the same thing that 5 of your other friends would answer, there is no reason to discuss this topic moving forward for the Common and the Coalition application. So, but be aware of that. Okay, so the next screen. I find it important to indicate the University of California personal insight questions. The University of California system is very popular for our students up here, whether they're applying to UCLA, UC Berkeley, Santa Barbara, or the other 6 or 7 schools that are down there. But instead of just a single essay, the University of California has personal insight questions. As you can see, there are 8, and students must answer 4 of those 8 questions, and the response is limited to 350 words each. So I'll say quite simply, if you're applying to the University of Washington, one University of California school, and let's say Gonzaga, right off the bat, you could very well be looking at least 10 separate essays and supplemental questions. So be aware of that. If you're thinking, well, I'm going to start my applications in October, think about all the potential supplemental questions that you're going to have to answer in addition to these basic prompts here. Okay, next slide. Okay, so once again, what are colleges looking for in an essay? Well, as I say in my first bullet point here, consider the essay as a short story or about a moment in your life. You do want to make it interesting, and you want the opening statement to capture a reader's attention and not immediately elicit a yawn. So students, if you're used to writing an English essay or a history essay, we have statement, explanation, example, or whatnot, that is not what the college essay is. They really want it to be more about a story in your life, or a moment in your life that captures the essence of who you are. So for instance, so these pictures, these were shared to me previously, and I just thought they were great. The typical student and the typical admissions counselor. Now imagine an admissions representative who is reviewing 50 applications a day. And each application, of course, has at least 1 essay plus supplemental prompts. You don't want to put them to sleep. So what I did is I have a couple scenarios at the bottom. And I asked readers of this to say, which of these questions, or which of these statements is one going to make you move on and learn more about a student? So the first one, I learned a lot about myself last summer as a counselor at Camp Sambika. I don't know about you, but that does elicit a yawn to me, because it's quite possible that during the course of the day, I read 10 essays that were very, very similar to that. However, the next one, I thought this was really interesting, and you're going to see the final paragraph of this essay in a couple of slides. But the student who wrote this said, "When it rains, the inhabitants where I live are the last to know. Welcome to short people land." I just thought that was a really interesting attention getter. So next slide. Continuation. Answer the question. This is really important, because sometimes students, they'll read these essay prompts, they'll say, I have something in my mind, but I'm not sure exactly how to write it, or they try to force the answer into a question, so they don't really answer the question. So as mentioned earlier, I work for a school in Pittsburgh, Duquesne University, very similar to a Gonzaga. And our health professions programs, they were very, very popular. We asked a very simple question. Why do you want to be a healthcare professional? We didn't say, tell us about a book you've read, an obstacle you've overcome, or a lesson learned. Answer the very specific question that is asked. And then you want to differentiate yourself as well. When a student says to me, I want to help people, which is why I want to be a nurse or a physical therapist, Well, sure, that's great. That's a good start. But every student who wants to get into the health professions generally says, I want to help people. But it doesn't give any insight between you and any other student who is applying. So colleges do want to know something that's genuine about the applicant, that shows reflection or growth. They want to know what the student wants us to know beyond grades and test scores. So if you look at the student who was in short people land, I thought that was an interesting opening statement. So I'm thinking, okay, there's a little person who's applying. Next slide. So this is how this student, the final paragraph of the essay said, my residency in short people land has shaped my capacity for diligence, camaraderie, empathy, and laughter. Thanks to my height, I have nearly everything required to attack the ordeals of life and still maintain sanity. Neither have I lost respect for the people up there, so please do not hesitate to bend down. I'll meet you in the land down here. That was just fascinating to me when I read that, and it really speaks to that student. And I'm sure that it answers the question that, you know, probably has something to do with character and so forth and overcoming obstacles. And by the way, you'll see that that came from colleges that made a difference from Princeton Review. So there are means out there for you to find sample essays and such. So, but that was one of my favorites. Next slide. Okay, so some tips. Complete the essay over the summer. So if we have any seniors here right now who are just getting started, and you've probably seen, boy, these are a lot of essays and essay prompts that I have to do in a short period of time. Know that, so if you're a junior this year, know that the essay prompts for the common application are often available by January of your junior year. So keep an eye out for those. And if you have some time over the spring of your junior year, it's a good time to start brainstorming and writing your essay over the summer. You know, given the amount of time spent, it is often the lengthiest portion of the college application. And if you do it over the summer, you're going to find a lot less stress. You're going to have fewer distractions, exams, homework, etc. So like I said, brainstorm in the spring and write, just write. If you have a really good topic and you're just pouring things down on paper, don't stop for punctuation and see if you misspelled a word or whatnot. Keep your thoughts flowing freely. And if you're at 1,000 or 1,500 words, great. That means you have a great idea. You can work with somebody else. You can get a friend, you can get a parent or somebody, your English teacher, just to kind of help you formulate your thoughts and bring this down and do some editing so that you can get your essay down to the required number of words. And at the bottom, I say, be honest and be sincere. That is really important, again, because this is about who you are as an individual. Be reflective and don't tell, and be descriptive. I like some of the descriptions that they have here. I could taste the salt water and seaweed in my mouth. I could hear every hollow ring of the bell. The room smelled like gingerbread men and vanilla icing. So you're really painting a picture for the individual that is reading your essay. And once again, you want to keep them enthralled. You want them to see where your essay is going. So that's why I say when you start with a really solid premise, you're going to draw that reader in and you're going to pull them right down to the end, and they're really going to get to know you. And yeah, don't be afraid to brag. You know, this is something that's really important. And again, if you were in on last night's session, I think you probably caught that from our college reps saying, yeah, you know, tell us about yourself. You know, give us the big story about who you are. And like I said, when I say don't be afraid to brag, if you're smart, you know, that's fine. Bring it out as long as it comes in and answers the question. You know, I talked about health professions earlier. You know, if you did 300 volunteer hours somewhere, you put a lot of work and effort in, and the people who had a chance to observe you, if they bragged about you, tell your story. You know, it's okay to brag. And like I said, keep it at 500 word max. That way, any school that, like a UW, although this year, I'll be honest with you, UW does give up to 650 words. In the previous few years, they wouldn't take any more than 500. But if there are colleges that won't take any more than 500 words, be sure before you send the application that you limit the word count so that it doesn't get cut off when they receive your application. Okay, what not to do. Don't begin by the essay by introducing yourself. There's so much in your application that already does introduce you. Don't reiterate extracurricular activities. This is really, this is very common because when a student writes about themselves, so much about who they are often comes out in the various activities. If they're writing about something and if they're an athlete and they've participated in sports, it's a big part of their life, and that's really where this comes from. Well, if you're starting to introduce the things that you put in your activity section, then the reader isn't going to learn anything new about you. So please make sure that you don't reiterate anything else in your application. And you have to be concise. Don't, if you start on one topic and the next thing you know, you start trailing off on different topics, things are just going to get too muddled. So you do want to stay focused. Don't reuse essays in the same application. So as an example, if you choose to write on the COVID question, if you were affected in some way because of COVID-19 that was, very unique to you, don't reiterate that in the primary application, because now the reader is just catching the two of the same thing. So be very, very careful that you don't reuse the same topics throughout your applications. Don't talk about someone else in detail. You might find that a college is going to ask a supplemental question, or if it's like, tell us about somebody in your life who has influenced you in some way. Where I say, remember the school wants to learn about you, not your grandparent. It's one thing to write about how your grandparent has influenced you, but you don't want to reiterate all the great things your grandparent did. As college reps will say, boy, this is an awesome essay. We would love to admit your grandparent, but we don't know anything about you. So be careful of that. Don't get caught in that trap. And try not to write about topics that might be written by others. If you won the state championship by winning, kicking the scoring goal, and it was the greatest moment in your life and you want to tell the world, well, don't forget, if you were a soccer player, there are about 20 other sports out there that have state championships, district championships, and so forth. And once again, a reader might catch something about your essay and you're going to say, boy, I already read 3 or 4 just like this today. And again, don't forget that COVID response. Unless if you were truly affected in some way, just avoid the COVID response for the primary essay here. Okay, next question. Okay, so don't forget to review. So I want to see who can see what's going on in that bullet point there. Check for misspellings, punctuation, and capitalization, of course. And check for content. I love this. These were some funny quips that college reps found in essays previously. I was so excited to finally be a candy stripper at the UCLA Medical Center. I recall with great fondness the many hours my brother and I spent hunting peasants. I never personally experienced death until my grandfather died. And I have made the horror roll every semester. So, students, I know sometimes you don't want your parents to read your essays for whatever reason, but it's okay to let them do it, for grammar and such, because trust me, they'll catch these things. And then, as I say, have another set of eyes review the essay, preferably somebody who has not read it yet, because if they have read it, they may have missed some of the same things that you have. And you can see, I say the reviewer should be careful not to provide too much insight. And I do put parents in parentheses. Parents, this is a warning for you if you are listening. I can't tell you how many times students have put countless hours into writing their essays and so on and so forth. And then all of a sudden, the parents say, well, maybe if you should write about this, or don't forget to do that. Next thing you know, it blows up the essay. And then it's not written in the student's words or whatnot. And I'm just going to give you a little tidbit here. I had a chance to meet with the Dean of Admissions at a very highly selective liberal arts college. and he joined me in an AP English class to talk about college essays. And his enthusiasm about a specific essay was great. You know, he just poured through it. He said, "Oh my gosh, the student's so great. It's so awesome." And, you know, it was just really, everything that was written really captured their attention. And he said at the very end, he just slapped his head and he goes, "Oh, the final essay." He said, "I can tell this is where the parents stepped in it, because it was completely different than the rest of the essay, and you can just kind of tell it was something that the parent wanted in there." So please be very, very careful. These are professionals that have read thousands of essays, and they know when the student hasn't been part of the process or they've been taken out of part of the process. Okay, next. Okay, so supplemental essays. As I said previously, if you're applying to, say, 4 or 5 schools, you have the UW, you have a common application school, you have the UCs, and maybe you apply to Stanford. Stanford's going to have 8 supplemental essays, 4 that are 50 words, 4 that are 250 words. Then you're going to have the primary essay. If you apply to a UC school, there's 4 essays there. You have the UW primary essay. They have a supplemental. Those are a lot of essays and essay prompts. And remember, every one of them are asked for a reason. So here's a good example. Carnegie Mellon University, the why us question. Students, you should always be prepared to answer why us, or in some cases, more specifically, why do you want to study this particular major? Carnegie Mellon University, if you're not familiar, is a top 25 university in the world, some of the best computer science engineering programs in the country. They want to know specifically why you want to major in some of those programs. And you'll see I highlighted in red, your essay can impact our final decision. So be careful and be ready to answer that question. The other buzzword on a lot of college campuses is diversity. And a lot of supplemental questions will cover diversity. So it is a buzzword. And this is where the University of Washington comes in. So they're keeping the same essay as last year. It says, our families and communities often define us and our individual worlds. Community might refer to your cultural group, extended family, religious groups, neighborhood or schools, sports teams, clubs, coworkers, etc. What is great is, even though this is a diversity question, I have talked to so many students in the past who say, I don't bring any diversity to this campus. Look at me. We're already diverse here in the Seattle area. Well, see where they talk about coworkers, sports clubs, teams. Everybody has something different about them that they can bring to the table. So it just takes a little bit of thought and a little bit of brainstorming. So, but I use these 2 supplemental essays in particular because most colleges are going to come up with some form of question very similar to this. Next. Okay. Anything else you wish to share? Questions? So this is another one. So if a student has bad grades caused by circumstances beyond their control, remember, taking COVID out of the question, you have another place to write about that. This is a good place to discuss those issues. I'll just use a couple of examples here. If a student is an athlete and they received a concussion, and that meant 2 weeks out of school, maybe because of protocol, you know, you might have 2 or 3 AP classes, and you know how difficult it is to miss even 1 or 2 classes that are very competitive classes like that. So if you had something that caused you to miss a lot of classes, it affected your grades, maybe you're, you know, a very strong A or AB student, but then all of a sudden you have a semester where you had 2 C's, 3 C's, a D. That's the time to share this. Oftentimes students will ask me, they'll say, Bob, you know, I don't want to sound like I'm complaining, you know, I don't want to be that person. I said, nope, that's specifically why they asked this question. And I can tell you in too many cases reviewing applications in my background where I see a really good student and all of a sudden first semester junior year, second semester sophomore year, I saw some bad grades, maybe there was an uptick or something. You don't want the counselor to guess, and because it can be very difficult to follow up because of how busy they are, that's the time to answer this specific question. Now, I also say supplemental questions listed as optional should be considered required. Now, that does depend on what the optional question is. The COVID optional, if you weren't affected any differently than any of your other friends or whatnot, then you don't have to write it. But if they do an optional question that sounds like a supplemental, answer the question. And then a student applying to, as I say, and I've said this before, only, in quotes, 5 colleges can expect to answer as many as 8 to 10 essays. Now that presumes you're not applying to a UC and a Stanford, where once again, that's 12 different supplemental or primary essays right there. So be prepared for those. Okay. Boy, I'll tell you, I really blew through that this evening, but I really hope that helps. But I know that there are often a lot of questions that come up. And so I see that we have a few out there. And Wendy, I think you're going to be throwing the questions out my way.
Sophia will.
Sure. The first one is, should it be fine? This was asked by a student, if my essay has 580 words.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Should it be fine if my essay has 580 words?
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, if you're at 580 words, I think that's great. Just as I said, though, be prepared with your essay that if you're applying to a college that says we limit our word count to 500, then be sure that before you submit your application to that college, that you edit your essay so that it doesn't go over. Because if you have that impactful final paragraph, you want to make sure that the college does catch that.
Thank you. The second one is there a word limit including the COVID-19 questions?
So, yeah, so you will see, so for every college, they're going to tell you what the word limit is for each specific question. So, so the COVID question limits you to 250 words, so max. And then, and as I said, if you're applying to the UW, who once again does give you up to 650, then you can write up to 650 for the primary essay, and then up to 250 words for the COVID.
Thank you, Bob. The third one is, are there any questions about what you achieved during quarantine?
You know, I'll tell you what I like about that question is that I kind of covered that in a way with a student recently. And I think when you're looking at optional questions, because the COVID talks about, have you been affected in any way? This wouldn't go in there. But if there is an optional question that a college asks, like additional insight or whatnot, I would say by all means, because for the student that's asking this question, I would like to think that this could be one of those brag questions. If you did, you know, I'm thinking early on during COVID when people were running out of masks, I know that there were some people that did everything they could to stitch masks, do things. They wanted to help their neighbors in some way. And if you did something really great and you thought you really achieved something and the opportunity were available via an optional question, I would say go for it.
Thank you, Bob. The next one is the application viewed by the admission officer as a whole? So if you mention something at the beginning, it would still be relevant as they work their way through the application?
So if I'm reading the question correctly, I'm going to say yes, absolutely. It is reviewed as a whole. Now, do keep in mind, because the number of applications that they're reading are many. The UW gets about 50,000 applications perhaps, and every one of them is going to come with an essay. They may take about 2 to 3 minutes to read the essay. And that's why how you start the essay is so important, because when you capture the reader's attention, you want to drag them into the whole application. But once again, if something starts out with, well, for the last 3 years, I was a camp counselor at Camp Sambika, or I learned a lot as a counselor at Camp Sambika. Yeah, you know, that might kind of put them to sleep. It doesn't mean that they're going to stop reading, but if the essay doesn't pick up or capture their attention, they're probably going to take a lot less time than 2 or 3 minutes to read it.
Thank you. If they have multiple optional supplemental essays, should they reply to all of them?
Okay, so I'm thinking perhaps this question was written early on in the session, because yes, you know, as I answered, I do highly recommend that students do all of the optional questions that are available to them if they are significant. Okay, so as I said, with the one essay prompt, let's see, I'm trying to remember how it was phrased. That said, like, the anything else question, anything else you wish to share. If you didn't have any sports injuries that affected your work or your school performance or whatnot, no reason to answer that. But otherwise, if the question does read like a supplemental essay where they really want to learn something about you, or you can share something significant, by all means, answer the supplemental.
Thank you, Bob. The next one is, where should I search for more info and help with the essays?
Yeah, again, great question. So first of all, of course, this session will be recorded if it does help you. And I believe that at least Issaquah High School, or each high school will have a copy of this presentation, number one. Number two, I think you saw where I did reference the one student's essay prompts with the Princeton Review. They have something, but there are some colleges out there. Connecticut College is one. They're located in New England, highly selective liberal arts college. Johns Hopkins University is another. They're great. Dickinson used to have one. What you can Google, and I'll just use Johns Hopkins to start. Google Johns Hopkins essays that worked. And what it would do, it'll jump you to Johns Hopkins University and take you ultimately to a link where they provide sample essays of students who were admitted to the university. And so some of the essays that work, they'll either just give you the essay prompt and the essay that got it. And in other instances, they'll have feedback from the admissions representatives as to why they say that application worked. So to be honest with you, yeah, you can do the Princeton Review, you can buy the book for a few bucks or whatnot, but some of these resources are online. And boy, when you can get it right from the pros at Johns Hopkins and Connecticut College, and again, I think Dickinson, you'll find them right online.
Thank you, Bob. Does using high vocabulary in your application help?
Let's see, I'm sorry, can you repeat that question?
Does using a high vocabulary in your application help?
Oh, so if I'm hearing that correctly, in terms of vocabulary, another great word, another great thing to think of. Be very, very careful about using the thesaurus. So look, there are some students, you know, you can read their essays and through, you know, everything is coming out of their head. But in other instances, you can see where a student probably jumped to the thesaurus to change up the word and use words that they would never use in their day-to-day language. Don't do that. It's about being authentic. Okay, so I'm trying to remember. I think it was the rep from the University of Florida yesterday. You know, she said it's not the big words. It's not, you know, trying to find this, you know, like trying to find this philosophical bent or whatnot. You know, find a moment in your life, find something that's meaningful to you, put it in words, put it in your words, have somebody read it, make sure that you do the spell check and send it in. Don't make this any harder than it has to be or you think that it is.
Yeah, thank you, Bob. And that's the questions for now.
Oh, well, wonderful. So, so this, I know this was kind of quick. You know, there's something else that just kind of jumped out to me, and it's just because I didn't really want to read through all the different prompts word for word. And when I talk about authenticity, one of the examples that I use sometimes is if you're not funny, don't try to be funny. As I said, if you're not philosophical, don't try to sound philosophical. Be yourself. And since we do have a little bit of time, I'm going to give you an example of an essay. And I'll be honest with you, I almost come to tears every time I talk about this. And students, I know this is hard. I was at a luncheon one time with 5 very highly selective colleges. And even the college counselors that were there, the high school counselors, they're all asking the same questions that you ask or your parents ask. What are you looking for? What's, you know, what makes a winning essay? Look, you know, for a school that gets 50,000 applications and they only accept 1,000 students, you know, quite frankly, there's probably 20,000 essays that they absolutely love. And students who have perfect GPAs and SAT scores, it's very, very difficult for them. And again, there is no right or wrong answer, period, when it comes to college essays. So instead of saying, what are you looking for? I asked the reps if any one of them would be willing to share an idea or an essay that they found impactful. And Georgetown University, the dean, relayed one, and it's similar to one of the essay prompts. And I think it had to do with when you, the student, realized that you went from, say, I can't remember I'm paraphrasing, when you went from being a teenager to when you were recognized as being an adult. And so what happened, there was a student driving in the car with his mother. And I don't know how it started, but essentially what happened is the family experienced, sadly, a lot of death in a very, very short period of time. And because it was just the student and the mom in the car, it led me to think about where this might have been going. So the student was a new driver, 16 years old, just got their license. Mom's driving home from the funeral home, and the student's in the passenger seat. Looks over at his mother and sees just a totally wearied face, just exhausted. And he said, Mom, why don't you pull over and let me drive? Now, parents of 16-year-olds that just got their license, usually I know they let them drive for a little bit so they can learn, but once they get the license, they say, no, I'm driving. Or when they do say yes, and in this instance, the mom, she didn't say a word. She just pulled over, got out, the student, and they switched sides. They got in the car, and now again, that's where the parent usually holds on very tight to the, you know, to the dashboard in front of them or whatnot, or they're hitting the imaginary brake from time to time. But in this case, about 30 seconds later, as the student's driving down the road, glances over at his mother and sees that she's exhausted. She's asleep. Her head is leaning up against the door. And it was that moment in time, right then, when the student said, wow, when did I get to the point, when was it that my mom looked at me and said, okay, you're old enough, you're an adult, you're the person I can rely upon now. And that's where it was. And just a truly perfect example of answering a question exactly and finding that moment in time. Everybody has a moment in time, and that particular essay will always stand out to me.
Thank you, Bob. There's one more question there.
Yeah.
How much can having a good essay save you from a bad SAT or ACT score?
Yeah, well, so first of all, if you are a senior that is asking that question, you probably know by now that almost every college in the country is either test optional or test blind now, which means if you do feel that you have a bad SAT score, and bad is usually in the eye of the beholder, then you don't have to submit those SAT scores. Okay, so very, very simply, if your SAT score doesn't at least meet the average of a test optional school, average or higher, then just don't submit the SAT or the ACT score. So, however, once we do get through this pandemic, and we will, if you're a freshman that asks that question or a sophomore, then there's a chance that, you know, SAT, ACT is going to bounce back. In this case, I'm just going to say it's going to be dependent upon the college that reads the essay. So highly selective colleges, they have so many students that have perfect SATs and GPAs that sometimes it doesn't make any difference. And by the way, it doesn't mean that if you apply to a highly selective college and you don't have perfect SAT scores, you should still apply, okay? So, but in general, SAT scores, like a GPA, generally determines how a student will fare when they get to that college. So if you're somebody who wants to study engineering, and while you may have good scores in math and physics, I should say good grades in math and physics, if they require an SAT score and you struggled in math, oftentimes it's going to, a good SAT or ACT probably won't help in that instance. So in some cases it might, but in most cases it's more about, do you have the acumen to be successful, the academic acumen to be successful in these programs. Really what you're trying to do is find a spot for that school, and they also want to know if you're a good fit for a school. So as an example, you can have what might be deemed the best essay ever written. But if through the rest of the application, if you say, I want engineering and I want a big school that has football on Saturdays and I want all that excitement, and you apply to a college like Whitman, as much as you loved the campus and you felt, boy, what a great fit for me, you're not going to get it with engineering, and they're not a big football school. They're going to say, boy, no matter how great the student is, they're not a good fit for us. So a lot of times what the essay is trying to do is determine the kind of fit. As important as fit is for you, they want to find students who are a good fit for them as well.
Thank you, Bob. The next question is also similar to the earlier one, but how does the importance of essay compare to the importance of perfect grades?
Yeah, so yes, I'm going to say similar to that. But I will jump back. When I talked about the highly selective colleges where, as an example, Yale, I talked to a Yale rep one time and I said, what's it like rejecting students who have perfect GPAs, 10 AP classes, and a 1590 SAT? And her response to me was 1590, 1600. She just, you know, shrugged her shoulders. That's an everyday application for a lot of those schools. But while they do reject students that have perfect SATs and perfect GPAs, the essay may very well have gotten that 1350 or 1400 SAT student into the college. So yes, I mean, essays, they are and can be very, very important to those highly selective colleges. Think back to what I said about Carnegie Mellon University and that piece that I highlighted. if you know in your heart you want to be the best computer programmer engineer out there, and they ask you the question, why do you want to study engineering here? And you give a so-so answer and you have a perfect SAT score, they could just say, thanks, but no thanks, and move on to the next application. So that is why solid essays and answers to supplemental questions can be very, very important to you moving forward.
Thanks, Bob. The next question is, I guess, from a junior. So if you're a junior, what about juniors and ACT and SAT? Should we be trying to sign up and prep juniors for the tests?
So, yeah, good question. I would say if and when you have an opportunity to take an SAT or an ACT, then do it. I know that they keep canceling and keep canceling. I felt terrible for the seniors who've struggled through this for months. But that's also why I'm glad pretty much every college decided to go test optional or test blind so that students didn't have to worry about that. But in particular, if you think that you're a good SAT or ACT taker, and if and when the time comes that you can sign up for them, then yes, I do recommend that you take them. I wouldn't worry so much about test prep yet, however, because most test prep places will say, we'll start our test prep about 6 to 8 weeks before you are ready to take the actual SAT or ACT. Because if you start a prep now, but you're not signed up to take an SAT until May, a lot of what you learned at this point, whether it's skills and strategies and so forth, oftentimes that gets lost and muddled over the coming weeks and months. So I wouldn't worry so much about taking a test prep yet until you know that you're signed up and actually ready to take the SAT or the ACT. And just as an aside, I do not recommend taking an SAT or ACT until you've minimally completed Algebra 2. I know many of you, especially juniors, are already in pre-calc or calculus or whatnot, but there are many juniors out there who are only in Algebra 2 their junior year. They plan on taking pre-calc senior year. There is a section of the SATs, and I believe the ACT, that's about Algebra 2, and you generally don't learn that until the end of Algebra 2, until about April or May of the year that you've taken it.
Thank you, Bob. The next question is there a point in taking a SAT in November to improve the score as a senior?
So if you are, so if you're a senior and you've already taken the SAT, and you want to take it again, maybe because you have taken prep or whatnot. Well, first of all, if you can, if there's any spots anywhere available in November, and you really want to take it, I know people who have taken it in Bend, Oregon, and Spokane, who are from Seattle, just to try to get it in. If you want to take it, and you can, by all means do it. Keep an eye on deadlines of the colleges to which you are applying. So if you are applying early action to some colleges, some of them might say, we will take up to the October SAT. Some will, and many will say they'll take the November SAT. Just be aware of the deadlines before you do sign up to take it.
I think that's pretty much it, Bob, for the questions.
So, yeah, okay. So I do hope this was very helpful, and I do see a question about the other presentation from last night. I'm sure you'll cover that. It is out there. And just in case, I did tell your awesome PTSA parents. I know that there's another session tomorrow night on financial aid with Paula Bishop. Paula rocks. She's a lot of fun, and she'll provide a lot of great information for you on scholarships and financial aid. And I love her. She'll be great.
Thank you, Bob, so much for this evening. Let me just mention a couple things, just playing up on what Bob just said. Yes, tomorrow night, our third and final event for College Week by Issaquah High PTSAs with Paula Bishop. She's a CPA specializing in helping families to figure out how to pay for college. She addresses or can address various unique scenarios that could be hitting people. So it's called Paying for College Without Going Broke, and there's a registration link on our Issaquah High PTSA website. I also want to mention, if you haven't taken advantage of it, Issaquah High School has a number of universities visiting each Wednesday in a virtual way. So please do, you know, if you see, please review the website and see if there's universities or colleges of interest to you that you might want to explore and see when they're coming to visit via virtual Wednesday. The last thing I wanted to mention is that we talked a little bit about tonight about ACTs and SATs, and on November 7th, Issaquah High PTSA has partnered with Huntington Learning Center, and we'll be doing a practice SAT virtually on November 7th and a practice SAT on November 14th with Huntington Learning Center, who will then provide a scores back session on November 18th. And these are real exams, but the scores don't go anywhere. It's just an opportunity to take the exam and see what it's like and see what's on it. So you'll find a registration link on our website for that as well. So thank you, Bob. Thank you, Issaquah High PTSA, and thank you all students and parents that asked questions and listened and participated tonight. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Good luck, students. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good